might be the first time I play him all year. I already, in my first lineup, have Streels lined up and ready to go.
Streels, my dog. He's definitely in my lineups this week. He's been so consistent recently. His approach game's been really coming around. He's got a very solid short game. Streels is a guy that I'm on heavily this week at 8,600. I think he's a pretty good value, just given the lack of strength in the field and how well he's been playing. So I'm all over Streels myself at 8,600. Strokes gained approach numbers look awesome. He plays Donald Ross courses very well, similar to a Ryan Moore. And you get the $900 discount. I think he's got every bit the chance of Ryan Moore to finish top 10, top 15 this week. And I mean, shoot, he's got twice as many top 10s this season as Ryan Moore does. So it might be a little bit of a mispricing there on DraftKings' part. I think we can take advantage there with Streels at 8,600.
I dig it. So you can fill me in if I'm wrong, which I probably am. But the only other guy I even like in the 8K range here is Kevin Tway. His game just kind of sets up for this course, I feel. But I'm really not interested. Maybe you could talk me into Wise, and the show loves Jason Kokrak, but neither of those guys really cracked my list. But Kevin Tway did.
Yeah, I can see why on Tway. He's shown some pretty good form here in the last few weeks. Finished 5th last week. His price bothers me a bit because he's almost always down in the low 7K range. And I just don't want to play him at elevated ownership. He's a very volatile player. And I think if he gets a little crooked off the tee, this course could punish him a little bit as far as having opportunities for birdies. So just because of his price point and what I believe his ownership is going to be, I'm actually fading Tway. There are a couple of guys I like at the bottom of the 8K range, but we got to touch on like Victor Hovland and Jason Kokrak, some of these guys that have been really hot names that have been talked about a lot. Kokrak finally missed his first cut this year. He was terrible last week, 152nd, missed a bunch of putts inside 5 feet, only made 5 birdies over the course of 2 rounds. I think Kokrak's run is over, man. I've been saying that for a while, and he finally hit the wall. I mean, he's finished 60th or worse in 3 of his last 4 events, so I think you could kind of see it coming, but he just went to a very ugly fall last week.
But I think that's going to murder his ownership, so he's a little attractive to me. He didn't pop up in my model that I was running per se, but just his absolute nosedive last week could keep his ownership extremely low, and he is a guy that can fire a top 10 round.
No, he's not.
He could, I mean, theoretically, but I don't see it for Kokrak.
Like I said, he wasn't in my list, but just looking at people in that range with a name and has had some success this year, and I think his ownership will dip because of how bad he's been. I'm not on him. I'm not going to play him. But
I still think Victor Hovland's going to be too high owned, especially at his price point at 8,400. The guy's just getting his feet wet on tour as far as playing as a professional, so that's a guy that I'm looking to fade this week, given that he's one of the more well-known names there in that mid 8K range. I'll gladly take Streels. A guy I think is worth taking a shot on this week is Aaron Wise. The guy can make birdies in bunches when he's on. Showed pretty well at the U.S. Open, only having a bad Saturday, but other than that, he would have been right in contention. The guy's made 18 or more birdies in 4 of his last 7 events. And when you get these shootouts like this, I mean, he's got the ability to score as well as anybody in this range. So I like Aaron Wise as a pivot kind of off of Kevin Tway. And I actually like both the guys at 8K, like right at 8K. Jason Duffner and Brian Harmon, I think, are both pretty solid, safe plays to finish, 30th or better in this field. And I think Duffner in particular has a great chance to contend this week. If he can putt even like reasonably well, this course just calls his name, man. Fairways and greens all day. He's plenty long.
What happened to Duffner's hot wife?
Well, they are no longer together.
Right, but what happened?
I don't know. I think she's still running
How does he screw that up? That's what I want to know.
I mean, look, man, when you're a short dude with a beer gut and you just mainline chew all day and then she gets out there and sees all these other PGA Tour guys and they're after her. I mean, she probably just saw that the grass might be a little greener. I can't say I blame her, although I love Duff, man. But
yeah, they were in that couples article that Sports Illustrated does several years ago, and I remember looking at those pictures and going, "What the hell?"
Oh, for sure. Like, it didn't make any sense. You see her on her bikini with the golf club in her hand, like on the beach. It's like, how did he ever land her? But I don't know. I mean, the guy's actually really funny off the golf course. His personality on the course is hilarious. He could be making a triple bogey or an eagle. You would not know the difference. Like, the guy's he's just as even keeled as can be. But I do like this course for him a lot. I actually walked by him yesterday, and he was the inspiration for Ricky Fowler's current mullet that he's rocking. So, and Duffner's rocking it himself this week. So keep an eye out for Duffner and his mullet. I forgot to mention his mullet in my article, but we can still talk about it.
I haven't posted it yet, so you could always send an addendum if you'd like. So,
yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
With no Mark and no Chris participation here, I'm having to not be distracted and post ads. So that's fine.
You can post a little addendum there yourself. Harman's coming into form a little bit. He's coming off a top 10 finish last week, his first one in quite some time, since back in March at the Players' Championship. So 3 straight 66s for him last week. He made 19 birdies, also made 19 birdies 2 weeks earlier at the Memorial. He's the guy I'm getting on board with at 8K. I think his game's rounding into form, and he's one of those guys at that price point. I think he's a bit underpriced. I mean, he's only made 12 out of 22 cuts this year, but he's really kind of finding his form here in the last month. So Harman's a great iron player when he's on, and he's shown that the last few events. So I like him too at 8K. That pretty much rounds out the 8K range, unless you want to go with, I guess we talked about the fade too with Neiman, 8,900. I'm not on board with that at all.
Yeah, you hated Neiman, I hated Bubba.
There you go. I mean, I don't like Bubba either, but
right.
I guess we can call those our fades, right?
Sure, absolutely. All right, moving on, man. I don't know much about Kyung-Hoon Lee. I'm not too interested in him this week, but do we jump back on the Benny An train? I mean, he's been in a lot of our discussions. He's been in some of our lineups. He's been just kind of mediocre, but do we take another strike at him again this week?
Absolutely not. Benny An's, it's not just that he burned me last week, but he rode an incredible short game to a good finish at the U.S. Open. I got sucked in, didn't do enough research on him. There's no way I'm getting back on Benny An after last week, the way his ball striking is looking. If he had hit the ball well and putted horribly and it was just some aberration, I mean, maybe, but his numbers across the board are just terrible.
So Kyung-Hoon Lee was like 1% owned last week and was the share of first-round lead, which I think he ended up finishing, top 20 or so. Do we care? Is that momentum?
I mean, I don't hate KH Lee. I'm going a different direction this week in his price range. But if he fits into your lineups and he's a guy that you want to throw in there, I don't absolutely hate it, but I just don't. I don't love him this week as far as his numbers go, the way he's setting up. He's a very Duffner-like guy as far as fairways and greens and just kind of plods along. But I'm looking for guys with a little more upside. He hasn't shown that upside to make a ton of birdies and to have that high finish that you're looking for in kind of that 8K range. So I'm going to go.
I'm going with in the top of this range with judging based on the very small thumbprint profile picture in the DraftKings app. The best tour Gary Busey lookalike Charlie Hoffman. That's my guy at the top of the 7K range.
I talked about Charlie Hoffman last week. He had been trending in the right direction and then just putted absolutely terribly on Thursday. Just couldn't quite recover enough on Friday. But yeah, I'm actually going back to Charlie a little bit this week. I'm playing some 5 max entry events on DraftKings. I think I got an $8 entry 5 max that I'm playing, and I'm going to throw a couple Charlie lineups in there because I think everyone's going to be off of him after he burned him last week at a course that he's got great course history on. I think it was just a random ass bad putting around. That's all I'm chalking it up to.
Well, he's on my list, man. He's my favorite guy at the top of there. Well, him and Luke List, believe it or not, a couple of your favorite names. I'm on the List bandwagon this week.
Yeah, I'm hoping that you're right there. Back to Charlie Hoffman though. He does look a lot like Gary Busey now. He used to rock just the most beautiful blonde flowing locks. I remember watching with the Buick Open when he was in contention. I don't know, probably in like '06 or '07. And I watched the guy with his hat on, just the locks flowing out the back, just absolutely beautiful. And he hit some great shots too. I've always been a Charlie fan. He's a great dude by all accounts. Guy likes to get down with a little bit of the green from time to time. If you know what I'm not talking about golf greens either.
Dig it. Dig it.
Yeah,
man.
He's
So I probably
like
saw you up at the Buick Open in that time range. It was 2006. I was up there. My good buddy and who has been on the show a few times in the chat room, who we take pits from, Lindsey Roberts, who's down in Florida now. He was the Players Club bartender, bar manager there for several years. He worked there. So he took me and himself and the owners of the restaurant we were managing, and one of the owners' parents up to the Buick Open. He got us some nice tickets, and we went around. That's the owners that were billionaires, the owners' parents that were billionaires. And walking up to the gate there, the owner's dad, who was just stupid rich, but the nicest guy you'll ever meet in your life, put his arm around both of us on our shoulders, and he's like, "Well, guys, decided I wanted to fly a helicopter, so I bought one yesterday and hired a full-time pilot to teach me." I'll just never forget that conversation. Just like, "Hey, I'm 75 years old and rich as shit, and just decided I'm going to buy a helicopter."
I can't blame the guy. It sounds like a good hobby to take up when you're 75 and loaded.
Hell yeah, man! I dig it. Yeah, they were really cool people. That was a lot of fun. So, this dude was a engineer out of Purdue. He was the tech that pushed the button that started the first radio communication with the first commercial satellite in space. He was working for I can't remember the name of the company, but it turned into HughesNet, Howard Hughes' tech company. And he rose all the way up to CEO of HughesNet. He was on the founding board of directors of Sirius XM Radio and helped them merge together when Sirius and XM were two separate companies and merged. And him and his wife owned, which they sold, but owned Great American Clydesdales in Indiana, which was the world's second largest Clydesdale farm next to Budweiser's. Very interesting people.
Wow. Quite the resume there.
Yeah, very, very awesome, down-to-earth people. They were fantastic. I missed seeing those guys around. So anyway, we like Mr. Hoffman. And so what do you think about List, man? He's another guy, as he often does, kind of pops up in our range. And it's always like it's a Luke List whisper. Are you on him or off of him this week?
I don't know if I can call myself a Luke List whisperer. Like he's a guy that I've talked up a lot because his ball striking numbers are always there. I do think the course sets up pretty well for him, and I'm a sucker, so I'll probably take him in at least one GPP lineup. Guy played great at the PGA in May, and then came back and missed the cut at the Memorial and the U.S. Open. But I'm going to go more on long-term form on this one, and I'm going to take a stab on Mr. List this week. He's just too good to pass up at that price point. I think his price is depressed because he hasn't shown great form in his last couple of events. But if you're looking for upside in that high 7K range, I definitely think Luke List has a great chance at a top 10, even though he's volatile. I mean, he's got 4 top 10s in 16 events. That's one out of 4.
Do you like him more than my boy Vaughn Taylor, who won me all the money this week?
Vaughn did win you all the money last week. And he, I told you I was kicking myself because I was on him in my first build of the week. I like to go in like Tuesday morning or something and just go, all right, who am I liking this week? No podcast listened to yet. Let's just throw our guys in on instinct. And he was one of the guys in my first build, as was Ches. And I ended up not having that combination of guys in any lineup last week, which killed me. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to get off of Vaughn. Like, if Vaughn Taylor's super high owned,
so let me put it this way. Okay, I got one spot left, and it's $7,800. Okay, and I could put Hoffman, List, or Vaughn. So I got to pick one of those 3. those are the three highest guys I'm on in that range. I don't even want to talk about anybody else unless you are really strongly in favor of some of these 75, 7,400 guys.
I mean, there's a couple I don't mind, but of those three,